You stopped apologizing. You mastered your body language. You learned to value your absence. But there's one status signal most professionals miss entirely: the questions you ask. In 2019, researchers at Yale analyzed 10,000 executive conversations. They found that observers could accurately predict someone's rank within 3 questions. Not by the answers they gave, by the questions they asked. I'm Dr. Mira, and what you're about to learn is why intelligent people unknowingly ask questions that destroy their credibility before they get an answer. Here's what most people don't understand. Questions aren't requests for information, they're declarations of power. Every question you ask contains an implicit statement about who has authority in the interaction. And most professionals are broadcasting the wrong message. Let me show you the mechanism. When you ask a question, you're doing 2 things simultaneously. You're requesting information, yes, but you're also revealing your assumptions about hierarchy. Who has permission to decide? Who needs validation? Who controls the frame? And here's the critical part. People don't respond to your question. They respond to the status signal embedded in how you asked it. Harvard researchers found that questions phrased as permission requests, would it be okay if, do you mind if, received 40% more resistance than questions phrased as declarative statements followed by exception requests. Same information requested, completely different power dynamic. Because when you ask for permission, you're announcing that the other person has veto power over your decision. And once you grant them that power, they're neurologically primed to use it. Not because they want to block you, because you taught their brain that blocking you is an option. Let me break down the 3 question traps that destroy credibility, even for competent professionals. Trap 1, the permission question. This is where you frame your statement as a request for authorization. Can I share an idea? Is it okay if I push back on this? Would you mind if I took a different approach? Notice what's happening. You're asking permission to do something you're already qualified to do. And that question signals that you don't believe you have the authority to act independently. I see this constantly in meetings. Someone has relevant expertise, they've done the analysis, they have a valid perspective. And they open with, "Can I just say something?" The moment those words leave their mouth, their credibility drops. Not because their idea is bad, because they just announced they're not sure they're allowed to have one. Here's why this destroys you. When you ask for permission, you're activating the other person's evaluator mode. They're no longer thinking about your idea. They're thinking about whether to grant you permission to speak. And you created that dynamic before you said anything of substance. Trap 2, the validation question. This is more subtle. It's when you present your thinking, but then immediately ask for confirmation that it's correct. Does that make sense? Am I thinking about this right? Is this the right approach? What you think you're doing is being collaborative, inviting feedback, showing intellectual humility. What you're actually doing is announcing that you don't trust your own analysis. And here's the neurological response. When someone hears, "Does that make sense?" their brain interprets it as, "I'm not confident this makes sense." And if you're not confident in your thinking, why should they be? The irony is brutal. The more competent you are, the more damage these questions do. Because competence with validation-seeking questions signals imposter syndrome. You clearly know the material, but you don't believe you deserve to know it. Trap 3, the filler question. This is when you ask questions you already know the answer to, either because you didn't prepare or because you're filling conversational space. What's the timeline on this again? Can you remind me what we decided last week? What exactly are we trying to achieve here? These questions don't request new information. They announce that either you weren't paying attention, you didn't do the work, or you don't value the other person's time enough to come prepared. And there's a secondary signal. Filler questions reveal that you're uncomfortable with silence, that you need to fill every gap in conversation. And we've already covered what that signals about status. Now, here's where most people fail. They recognize these patterns in themselves and they overcorrect. They stop asking any questions. They try to appear like they have all the answers. And that's equally destructive. Because refusing to ask questions when you genuinely need information doesn't signal confidence. It signals insecurity masked as arrogance. So what's the solution? You don't stop asking questions. You restructure them. Let me give you the framework. It's called assume, act, invite, exception. and it's based on 3 principles. First, assume permission instead of requesting it. Don't ask, "Can I change the timeline?" Say, "I'm moving this to Thursday unless that creates a problem." Notice the shift. You've stated your intent. You've invited objection if there's a genuine issue, but you haven't asked permission to make a decision you're qualified to make. This does 2 things neurologically. It positions you as someone who takes action, and it makes any pushback require justification. They can't just say no. They have to explain why your plan doesn't work, which means you've controlled the frame of the conversation. Second, present conclusions and invite challenge, not validation. Don't ask, "Does this make sense?" Say, "This is the optimal approach based on X, Y, and Z. What am I missing?" Notice what changed. You've stated your position with confidence, and you've invited intellectual challenge, not emotional reassurance. The question, "What am I missing?" is powerful because it assumes competence and invites expertise. It says you've done thorough analysis and you're looking for blind spots, not asking if your thinking is acceptable. Third, ask questions that elevate the other person. This is the most counterintuitive principle. The highest status questions make the other person feel intelligent for answering them. What trade-offs do you see here? How would this need to change for different constraints? What's the second-order effect I should be considering? These questions do something sophisticated. They position the other person as a strategic thinker, not an information dispenser. And when you make someone feel smart, they associate that feeling with you. You've created status for both of you. Here's the test. In your next meeting, notice when you ask for permission, you already have. When you seek validation for thinking you're confident in. When you ask questions to fill silence instead of gain insight. And then restructure. State your intent and invite exception. Present your conclusion and invite challenge. Ask questions that require strategic thinking to answer. Because here's what happens neurologically. When people hear questions structured with assumed authority, their brain categorizes you as someone operating from a position of legitimate power, not someone hoping to be granted permission. So here's the equation. Permission questions redistribute power by granting veto authority. Validation questions redistribute power by outsourcing confidence. Filler questions redistribute power by wasting time. All 3 announce the same thing. You're not sure you belong in the conversation. I'm Dr. Mira. If you haven't watched the previous videos on apologies, body language, and strategic absence, watch them now, because the pattern is the same. You're not losing credibility because you lack expertise. You're losing it because your questions announce you don't trust yourself. Stop asking for permission you already have. Master the hierarchy.